Welcome to UBI Unplugged, breaking down the future of income. Glad to be back with you all to tackle some really interesting and important stuff today. Ready to dive in?
As ready as I'll ever be, I suppose. UBI still feels like a sci-fi concept to me, but okay, let's do it.
I'm ready, but I always come with my dose of skepticism. UBI is a fascinating idea, but the devil is always in the details, right?
Exactly, Sarah. And today we're not just talking about UBI in a vacuum. We're going to unpack it in the context of decentralized governance, citizen assemblies, blockchain voting, all that good stuff. And of course, the big question, how does a guaranteed income actually affect political participation, especially in a post-pandemic world?
Decentralized governance sounds like a buzzword bingo card. But fine, I'm willing to play along. My main concern is always, who pays for all of this? And how do we stop it from being completely abused?
Those are valid questions, Otto. And I think the who pays question is paramount. Taxes? Debt? What kind of economic impact are we realistically looking at? Also, UBI isn't a silver bullet. It needs to be coupled with other social safety nets. It's not a replacement for everything else, right?
Absolutely. It's part of a larger holistic solution. And to Otto's point about abuse, that's where the decentralized governance piece comes in. Imagine a system where citizens directly oversee the implementation and adjustments of UBI program through citizen assemblies and transparent blockchain voting. It's not foolproof, but it does add a layer of accountability.
Blockchain voting. Every time I hear about it, I think of the potential for hacking and manipulation. Is that fear unfounded? Because that's a big one for me. If you can rig the vote, you can rig the whole system.
That's a legitimate concern, Otto. Blockchain security is still an evolving field, but the potential benefits, increased transparency, auditability, and potentially higher participation are compelling. We need to be researching the best implementations and the risks continuously.
And there are different models being explored. Some are more vulnerable than others. But think about it this way. Right now, our political system, especially in the US, feels incredibly centralized and opaque. Money talks, special interests dominate. UBI coupled with decentralized governance could be a way to shift some of that power back to the people.
Okay, I'll grant you that the current system isn't exactly a shining beacon of democracy. But jumping to blockchain and UBI feels like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What's the evidence that this would actually be better? Where's the proof of concept?
Well, there are pilot programs happening around the world. Stockton, California had a UBI trial that showed some positive results, improved mental health, increased employment in some cases, although it was a limited sample size. And there are other experiments ongoing. But you're right, Otto, we don't have definitive large-scale proof yet, which is why careful policy design and evaluation are so critical.
And even those smaller trials offer insights. One thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is the frustration and, frankly, betrayal felt by some voters who initially supported figures like Trump. It stems from unmet economic promises. What if, instead of relying on these top-down solutions that often fail to trickle down, we had a UBI providing a basic economic safety net?
So you're saying UBI would be like political inoculation? Preventing people from falling for populist promises that never materialize?
In a way, yes, it addresses the underlying economic anxieties that make people vulnerable to those kinds of appeals. If people have a basic level of security, they're less likely to grasp at straws, less likely to be swayed by empty promises. It promotes a more rational electorate.
That's an interesting point, Jesus. But I worry about unintended consequences. Could UBI, if not designed carefully, actually decrease political participation? If people feel like their basic needs are met, might they become less engaged in the political process?
That's my fear, exactly. Apathy. If everyone's getting a check, who's going to bother fighting for anything?
That's a valid concern, but the evidence suggests the opposite. The Stockton trial, for example, saw increased civic engagement among recipients. People felt more empowered to volunteer, participate in community activities, and even pursue further education. When you're not constantly stressed about making ends meet, you have more time and energy to engage in civic life.
Okay, I see your point. And it makes intuitive sense. But the key word is empowered. UBI can't just be about handing out money. It has to be coupled with programs that promote education, job training, and civic engagement. It has to be part of a larger effort to build a more resilient and participatory democracy.
So it's not just about the money, it's about what? Hand-holding? making sure everyone feels warm and fuzzy about their place in society?
Not hand holding, Otto, but creating opportunities. It's about removing barriers. It's about giving people the breathing room to pursue their passions, contribute to their communities, and participate in the political process. Think about the Black community in places like Philadelphia, where economic struggles are particularly acute. People are working multiple jobs just to survive. They don't have time to go to town hall meetings or run for office.
And those communities are often disproportionately targeted by policies that further marginalize them. Think about immigration enforcement, for example. Recent actions in Tennessee, where over 100 people were arrested on immigration violations, disproportionately impacted communities of color. That creates fear, instability, and distrust in government.
Yeah, I saw that. Felt like a fishing expedition, pulling people over for minor infractions, then checking their immigration status. Is that really the best use of law enforcement resources?
Exactly. And it creates a chilling effect. People are afraid to interact with government agencies, even to access essential services. A UBI can provide a buffer against that fear, a sense of security that allows people to assert their rights and participate in civic life without fear of reprisal. It's not just about the money, it's about dignity and empowerment.
But let's be real, even with UBI, those communities would still be vulnerable to discriminatory practices. It's not a magic shield. We need strong legal protections, robust oversight, and a commitment to racial justice at every level of government.
So UBI is just one piece of the puzzle. We still need to fix all the other broken pieces.
Precisely. It's a foundational piece, but it's not the whole picture. It's about creating a more level playing field, a more just and equitable society. And that requires addressing systemic inequalities, reforming our political institutions, and empowering marginalized communities.
And that's where the decentralized governance piece comes back in. Citizen assemblies, for example, could provide a platform for those communities to have a direct voice in policy decisions that affect them. Imagine a citizen assembly specifically focused on immigration reform, where community members, legal experts, and policymakers could come together to develop more humane and effective solutions.
Citizen assemblies, that sounds like a lot of talking. And talking doesn't always lead to action. Plus, who gets to be in the assembly? Is it just going to be the loudest voices dominating the conversation?
Good point. Citizen assemblies need to be structured carefully to ensure diverse representation and prevent domination by special interests. They should be randomly selected, like a jury, to ensure a broad cross-section of the population is represented. And they need to be facilitated by trained moderators who can ensure that everyone has a chance to speak and that the conversation stays focused and productive.
And their recommendations need to be taken seriously by policymakers. They can't just be advisory bodies that are ignored by the powers that be. There needs to be a mechanism for translating their recommendations into actual policy changes.
So you're talking about a whole new layer of bureaucracy? More committees? More meetings? More red tape?
Not necessarily. It's about shifting power away from centralized institutions and giving it back to the people. It's about creating a more participatory and responsive government. Think of Switzerland, which has a long tradition of direct democracy. They use referendums extensively to allow citizens to vote directly on policy issues.
But Switzerland is a small, relatively homogenous country. Can that model be scaled up to larger, more diverse societies like the US?
It would require adaptation, of course, but the principles are the same: empowering citizens, promoting transparency, and ensuring accountability. And technology can help. Blockchain-based voting systems could make it easier and more secure for people to participate in elections and referendums.
We're back to blockchain again. I still have my doubts.
It's not a perfect solution, but it has the potential to address some of the challenges of traditional voting systems, like voter fraud and low turnout. But we need to be realistic about the risks and invest in robust security measures to protect the integrity of the system.
And it's not just about voting. Blockchain technology can also be used to create more transparent and accountable government institutions. Imagine a system where all government spending is recorded on a public blockchain so that citizens can see exactly where their tax dollars are going.
That would be unsettling. Knowing exactly how much the government spends on paperclips, would anyone actually want to see that level of detail?
Maybe not every single paperclip, but greater transparency in government spending is definitely a good thing. It helps to prevent corruption and ensures that resources are being used effectively. And it allows citizens to hold their elected officials accountable.
Exactly. And going back to UBI, imagine a blockchain-based UBI system where the distribution of funds is transparent and auditable. It would be much harder for corruption to occur, and it would build trust in the system.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these things could fit together. UBI, decentralized governance, blockchain. It's all about shifting power away from the center and giving it back to the people. But it still feels like a long shot. There are so many obstacles to overcome.
The political opposition will be fierce. Vested interests will fight tooth and nail to protect their power and privilege. And there will be legitimate concerns about the cost and feasibility of these programs. But the potential benefits are too great to ignore. A more just, equitable, and participatory democracy is worth fighting for.
And the post-pandemic world has only made these issues more urgent. The pandemic exposed the fragility of our social safety nets and the deep inequalities in our society. People are struggling, they're scared, and they're looking for solutions. UBI, coupled with decentralized governance, offers a path forward, a way to build a more resilient and equitable future.
So where do we start? How do we move from talking about these ideas to actually implementing them?
We need to continue experimenting with pilot programs, carefully evaluating the results, and learning from our mistakes. We need to build public support for these ideas, educating people about the potential benefits and addressing their concerns. And we need to elect leaders who are willing to champion these reforms.
And we need to hold those leaders accountable. We need to demand transparency, demand accountability, and demand that they prioritize the needs of the people over the interests of the powerful. It's a long and difficult road, but it's a road worth traveling.
All right, you've given me something to think about. I'm still not entirely convinced, but I'm less skeptical than I was at the beginning of this conversation. Maybe there's something to this UBI thing after all.
That's progress, Otto. And that's what these conversations are all about. Exploring new ideas, challenging assumptions, and working towards a better future.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Sarah, and thanks, Otto, for bringing your healthy skepticism to the table. It keeps us honest and forces us to think critically about these issues. And thank you all for tuning in. Keep the conversation going, and we'll see you next time on UBI Unplugged.
Later, everyone.
Bye.